The rain fell steadily in Chicago, each drop a reminder of the somber news that had just shattered Michael Harrison's carefully constructed life. He sat at his desk in his corner office, the skyline of the city framed by the large windows behind him. The world outside was alive with the hustle and bustle of a Tuesday morning, but inside he felt as if time had stopped. The call from his father's lawyer had felt surreal, almost like a scene from a movie. His father, Robert Harrison, had passed away, leaving behind a life that Michael had chosen to forget. 2 decades had slipped by since their last conversation, a heated argument that had left scars deeper than either of them had ever acknowledged. Michael had been determined to carve out his own path, one that led him far away from the small town of Oak Ridge and the expectations that came with it. He had traded the hardware store for the stock market, the family business for the high-stakes world of investment banking. Now, at 47, he was living the dream he had envisioned for himself. Yet the news of his father's death felt like a cruel twist of fate. The plane ride back to Oak Ridge was filled with a sense of dread and anticipation. As he descended toward the small regional airport, the landscape below began to look familiar. The rolling hills and dense forests stirring memories he had long buried. Oak Ridge had always felt like a cage to him, a place where dreams were stifled by the weight of tradition and expectation. The town hadn't changed much since he left. The same main street lined with quaint shops, the courthouse square where he had spent countless afternoons, and the faded welcome sign that seemed to mock him with its permanence. The funeral was a small affair, attended mostly by locals who had known Robert for years. Michael sat in the front row, feeling like an intruder in a life he had chosen to leave behind. As he listened to the eulogies, he realized how little he truly knew about the man who had been his father. Stories of Robert's generosity and quiet kindness painted a picture of a man he had never fully appreciated. He was struck by the realization that the father he had resented for so long was a stranger to him, a man defined by the relationships he had built in the community, relationships that had been severed between them. The following day, the reading of the will brought more surprises than Michael had anticipated. Warren Phillips, his father's attorney, sat across the table, his demeanor professional yet sympathetic. Michael had expected the hardware store and the family home to be the extent of his inheritance. But Warren's words shattered that assumption. Robert had amassed a fortune, nearly $5 million in various investments and real estate holdings. The revelation left Michael reeling, but the real bombshell was yet to come. Robert divided his estate equally, Warren informed him, half to you and half to a woman named Eleanor Winters. The name hung in the air like a specter, and Michael felt the room tilt beneath him. He demanded to know who Eleanor Winters was, but all Warren could provide was an address in Pine Creek, a small town about 30 miles from Oak Ridge. Robert had kept this part of his life private, and as Michael sat there, he felt a storm of emotions brewing inside him. Anger, confusion, and a nagging sense of betrayal. After the meeting, Michael returned to his childhood home, a place filled with memories both good and bad. As he sorted through his father's belongings, he stumbled upon photographs that turned his world upside down. There were images of Robert in his youth, smiling alongside a woman who was not Michael's mother. The back of one photo read, "Robert and Ellie, summer 1973. The woman was striking, her long dark hair framing a face that radiated warmth and joy. Michael's heart raced as he pieced together the fragments of a life he had never known. His mother had passed away when he was just 14. A loss that had left a void in his life. Robert had never remarried or brought anyone home that Michael could remember. Yet here was evidence of a woman named Ellie, who could very well be the Eleanor Winters mentioned in the will. Driven by a mix of curiosity and indignation, Michael decided to drive to Pine Creek, determined to confront this woman who was entitled to half of his father's fortune. The address led him to a modest bungalow on a quiet street. As he parked across from the house, his heart raced with anticipation. Before he could gather his thoughts, the front door swung open, revealing a woman in her early 40s. She had her mother's eyes, the same eyes from that old photograph. The realization struck him like a physical blow. This wasn't just Robert's lover from the past. This was Robert's daughter. Eleanor Winters studied his face, her expression a mix of curiosity and recognition. She had been told to expect him, and as they exchanged introductions, Michael felt the weight of their shared bloodline. She invited him inside, and the moment he crossed the threshold, the air shifted. Eleanor confirmed his suspicions. She was indeed his half-sister. Michael felt as though the ground beneath him was crumbling, and he struggled to comprehend the implications of what he had just learned. "How long have you known about me?" he asked, his voice barely steady. Eleanor's gaze softened as she answered, "I've known all my life. My mother never kept it a secret." She spoke of Robert's visits, the moments he had shared with her, and the love he had for her despite the distance. Michael felt a mix of anger and admiration. His father had lived a double life, managing to be present for both families while keeping them apart. The revelation was both a betrayal and a testament to Robert's complicated nature. As Eleanor prepared tea, Michael couldn't help but notice her resemblance to their father. The same jawline, the same thoughtful tilt of her head. She was a school teacher, dedicated to her students, and as they talked, he learned about her life in Pine Creek, her mother's passing 2 years prior, and the void that had left in her heart. Michael's anger began to dissipate, replaced by a complex mix of emotion as he listened to Eleanor's stories. Eleanor shared the history of her parents, revealing that Robert and Ellie had been high school sweethearts, deeply in love, until Robert's father had threatened to disown him if he didn't break things off. Young and afraid, Robert complied, but Ellie was already pregnant. The news shattered Michael's understanding of his father. Robert had moved on, marrying Michael's mother, while Ellie had raised their daughter alone, never revealing the truth until the day Robert stumbled upon them years later. As Eleanor showed Michael a box filled with cards and letters from Robert, he felt the weight of the years pressing down on him. Robert had been there for Eleanor's milestones, just as he had been for Michael's. But the two families had existed in separate worlds. The anger that had fueled Michael's resentment began to fade as he grappled with the complexity of his father's choices. Robert had intended to bridge the gap between them, but life had intervened and the moment had slipped away. Eleanor invited him to stay for dinner, and as they shared a meal, Michael learned more about Robert's visits and the man he had been in Eleanor's life. Her husband Tom shared fond memories of Robert, recounting how he had taught their son to fish and had always been willing to lend a hand. The image of Robert that emerged was so different from the stern, emotionally distant man Michael had known. Later that evening, Eleanor handed Michael a sealed envelope. "This is for you," she said, her voice gentle. "My father left it with me 5 years ago, with instructions to give it to you if you ever came looking for answers." Alone in his hotel room, Michael opened the letter with trembling hands. Robert's words poured out onto the page, a confession of love and regret. He spoke of his fear of losing Michael's respect and the burden of living a double life. The letter was a glimpse into the man Robert had been, a man torn between two families and the love he had for both. The next morning, Michael returned to his father's house, now his own, and together with Eleanor, they began to sift through Robert's belongings. In his father's desk, Michael found a journal filled with the struggles of a man trying to balance two worlds: the guilt, the joy, the moments of despair and happiness spilled out onto the pages, revealing a man who had tried to do right by both families. After a week in Oak Ridge, Michael made a decision that surprised even him. He invited Eleanor and her family to dinner at his father's house. As they gathered around the table, he proposed an idea that had been forming in his mind. He wanted to sell the house and split the proceeds as their father had intended, but he also wanted to establish a scholarship fund in Robert's name, one that would help young people from both Oak Ridge and Pine Creek. Michael's voice trembled with emotion as he spoke, and Eleanor's eyes glistened with tears. They were finally bridging the gap between their two worlds, honoring their father's legacy while forging a new path together. The local newspaper ran a story about the scholarship the following week, revealing the truth that Robert had worked so hard to hide. Reactions were mixed. Some in town were scandalized, while others were understanding. But for Michael and Eleanor, the acknowledgement of their shared history brought unexpected peace. Before returning to Chicago, Michael visited his father's grave one last time. He placed 2 photographs on the headstone, one of himself and one of Eleanor, side by side at last. The act felt like a healing ritual, a way to honor the father they had both loved in their own ways. Back in Chicago, Michael returned to his corporate life. But he was changed. The man who had left Oak Ridge decades ago, determined never to look back, now found himself making regular trips to both his old hometown and to Pine Creek. The walls he had built around his heart began to crumble, revealing not just painful truths, but also the possibility of a new extended family he had never known he wanted. In the years that followed, when colleagues asked about his weekend plans, Michael would sometimes smile and say he was visiting his sister. The simple truth felt like the most fitting tribute to their father, a testament to the complicated legacy of a man who had tried to love two families while navigating the complexities of life. The journey had not been easy, but it had opened a door to healing, forgiveness, and the unexpected joy of connection.